All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Optimize Your Marketing podcast. I am your host, Ian Binnick, founder of Optimize Your Marketing. And today I have a special guest with me. He's a content strategy guru. His name's Alec Beard. Alec, it's a pleasure to have you on the pod. How are you doing today, man?
I'm great. I've been looking forward to this. I know we have a lot of questions to dig into, so yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's great, man. I'm excited you're on. We've been talking for months now. And, I've been talking about getting this podcast started and actually having guests on. So it's awesome that it's finally happening. And yeah, I just hope that all the stuff we talk about, like the listeners find really useful. Actually, really quick, let's get into like what the listeners could expect and what we're going to cover. So we're going to talk about Alec's agency. We're going to talk about what he's been up to, some case studies, especially like some cutting edge strategy stuff that he's doing, which I think will be really cool and valuable for you guys out there. And then we're also going to be talking about some ways that he's stimulating deal flow. So if you're like an agency owner and you want to know like how do agency owners get deals, this is some things that Alec's doing. I'll talk about some of the stuff I'm doing as well. And then we'll wrap up with my favorite three questions. I think this is just going to be like a staple of the Optimized podcast where we talk about the most overrated marketing thing that you're seeing today, the most underrated, and then also just how you cope with stress as an entrepreneur, like, marketing or sales leader. So with that being said, Alec, are you ready to get started?
Yes, let's jump into it.
Let's jump into it, man. All right. So Alec, let's get started. Could you tell us about your agency and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the agency, it's called StoryWon. And I basically started it after I left my full-time position. I was working at kind of a scale-up startup stage fintech company. Prior to that, I was working at another early stage SaaS company. I was doing content and SEO. And I knew for a while that I wanted to, put on my entrepreneur hat, but I was too scared, and I needed, to kind of get my ducks in a row. But I made the leap. I've kind of productized and packaged my service. I'm doing content and SEO for early stage SaaS, and I'm about a year in at this point. And yeah, it's been great. I've learned a ton, and yeah, that's kind of what I got going on.
That's so cool to hear that you've like productized your service. I've actually been, talking to a lot of other agency owners as of late, and they've kind of mentioned how they've been having a really hard time scaling their agency because of how custom tailored every solution is for the clients they work with, and they don't have like a comprehensive templatized strategy that they could use across the board. And I think it's like awesome that you're doing that, bro. um I guess this gets into the next question here. So, like, what have you been up to as the founder of the agency? So, you've been productizing, you've been working with the clients. Like, what have you feel like you're spending the most amount of your time on right now?
So I'd say right now, again, I'm about a year in at this point. Right now, it's just service delivery. I mentioned earlier, I'm in the weeds a lot of the time, and I'm at this weird inflection point where the logical next step is to potentially scale. But right now, it's just me. I have a few contractors helping with things like putting content briefs together, editing articles, reporting, graphic design. But for the most part, I'm just kind of in the weeds every day. But a few months ago, I'd say about 6 months ago, when I was halfway in, I was all over the place. I was working too many hours. I was stressed out, and that was actually the moment where I said, "Okay, I need to really take a serious look at my operations," because I'm not the most operationally minded person. I think everyone comes into marketing or entrepreneurship with their own background. Some people, are very technically strong. Some people are creative. I think I'm good at the creative and the strategy. And so that was the biggest obstacle for me, was putting really clear operations in place. And so since then, I spent the majority of the past few months documenting all my processes, putting SOPs together, really just the granular details of what does each step in the service look like, so that I just have a running checklist that I can hand off to someone else. And I think, if anything, it makes the actual day-to-day work easier, and it allows me to really lock in, to deliver the highest quality service possible. So, I mean, I can get more in the weeds of like what that
Yeah.
those SOPs look like, but that's been the biggest game changer for me as someone who's operating as really a solo consultant with the help of a few, contractors and freelancers.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. I mean, a couple things stood out to me in what you just said. The first thing was you were focusing on service delivery. I don't know. We both work in co-working spaces a lot, and I don't know. Like, there's sometimes people will be on, or they'll be talking really loud, right? And they'll be on a call, and there
Yeah.
used to be this one person that I would hear all the time, and I swear he said this on literally every sales call he had, and he would say, "Good business breeds more business," and he would always be. Basically, he was alluding to like, "Hey, we have." Really good service, and if you have really good service, then it's going to bring on the next referral or the next client that you're working with. And I mean, like, as annoying as it was, like, it made perfect sense. So, number one, like, I just wanted to kind of build off what you're saying, like, focusing on service delivery. I think a lot of agency owners are not, which I think is like, it's really sad to hear. And they're so focused on, like, I need to get more leads, I need to get more clients. But I think, like, yeah, just good business breeds more business. So I think that's awesome to hear that you're doing that, man.
Yeah, and something I think is really interesting is, to your point, I think anytime someone goes down the entrepreneurship rabbit hole, a lot of what you see on the internet, the ads you get served, the forums and communities that you look into, everyone's always asking about lead gen, about scaling revenue. It's always about scaling, which is such an important part of building a business if kind of that's where you're at. But I think when you are in the weeds, that you have this instant feedback loop where you can say, this is what works, this is what's getting people results. Um, so you can really build that solid foundation, and from there, that's infinitely scalable. You can
Yeah.
scale that into something that really is high quality. And I think from what I've seen, and what I'm sure you've seen as well, is in my past full-time positions, working in house, I would work with agencies, and I'm like, this isn't quality. And I think that's what planted the seed in my mind of, I think I want to go out and do this, is because I'm like, they have operations in place, they have employees, obviously they have a business, but the actual output isn't good. And then, of course, a few months from then, we would drop them, they'd be churning clients, which is so interesting that I think a lot of people in the agency space always say churn is such a problem. We have a really tough time with turnover, which I do think is just part of the business model. But I think
Yeah.
it's exacerbated by the fact that people aren't focused on the quality of their service, or they get so far removed from it that they don't really understand what it looks like. I get off
Yeah.
my
And I
soapbox.
No, no, no. That was great. I mean, I was just gonna say a couple of things. So, like, one, I think what you're doing is really good because you do want to scale at some point in the future. So you have these SOPs so you can get people on the same level of at least experience and quality of work that you want for all of the clients you work with, especially since you're a little bit niche down too. That helps, so that basically all of your SOPs are tailored towards that niche and the output that you're expecting. So, yes, like 100%, that's like gonna be how you scale. I wanted to say this though too. I've talked to agency owners that especially people that go like the fractional CMO route, and in that situation, you can't really scale, right? Like, you are the service in a sense because you are the expert and you are providing strategy. So some people like you and I think are kind of aligned on the fact that like maybe we want to sell our agencies in the next like 5 years or so, or maybe not. I know I do, but I don't know about you. But it's people like that are in like the fractional CMO role where they're just providing strategy. They're not necessarily looking to sell their agency. They're looking to make solid income every single month and prime their pipeline every once in a while with people, but like they can't take on more than like maybe 4 clients. After that, it becomes like pretty unscalable for them to like provide the level of service and quality that they want. So I think just like keeping that in mind, it's not necessarily all about lead gen, even though that's all the ads you see. But it can definitely be, just like, hey, make a living off of this too, and do what you
Yeah,
want in your
absolutely.
life. So yeah, that's cool, man. Let's get into the next question. So, we're talking about your agency. I'd love to hear some of like the cutting edge trends that you're kind of seeing in like the content space and what you're using with your clients, and potentially even just like some case studies you'd like to share, man. That'd be awesome to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say SEO as a channel has not been boring over the past like year, 2 years. And anytime I talk to someone about SEO, I usually get mixed reactions. Some people swear by it. They're like, I built my business off of it, or they think it's the best channel that everyone should invest in. Some people think it's snake oil. I think it's super contextual. It depends on your industry, your go to market, motion. Are you product led? Are you, more enterprise? But I'd say my biggest observation over the past year, and what I think all, content people and SEOs are dealing with, is the fact that Google is constantly changing. And with their most recent search updates, it's like if you go onto any, search page, first page of the search results, you see a lot of Reddit threads and communities. And I think, I think, in my opinion, they overcorrected, because you go into these Reddit communities and they're not curated. So the information is kind of all over the place. It's not the best search experience. And now, as all marketers, are bound to do, they're becoming saturated. Again, you have people saying, we need a Reddit strategy. We need to be active in Reddit. So in Google's attempt to, create a better search experience, now people are just, polluting Reddit threads, and they're also becoming like, not super viable for content. So for me, in order to kind of differentiate myself and help my clients, the biggest thing, and what I think all good content people do, is really pulling on those internal experts within a company. So I'd say in terms of SEO, you do your keyword research, you put together a brief, you see what's going to rank. But more than anything, I think conducting interviews with product teams, customer success teams, account execs, and even customers, if you can get in front of them and ask them questions, I mean, there's your content topics right there. You can cross-reference that with what your keyword research says. And from here, you can say, okay, now we can really build a content plan that's, one, relevant to search intent, but also is going to help us stand out in the SERPs. That's helped me see a lot of success, because with tools like, ClearScope and all these other, content briefing tools, everyone has access to. So you might put together the perfect SEO, plan, the perfect SEO strategy, but you're not going to stand out in SERPs. And even if you do end up ranking, your conversion rates are probably going to be super low, because you don't have a unique story. Your product isn't baked in. So that's what I've been experimenting with. That's kind of how I was brought up, within my past two content roles in house. And so far it's worked really well. So I'm still, doing the work every day, trying to be better. But so far I found that's the best way to stand out for people doing content and SEO.
That
I think
is
I answered the
actually
question.
so.
I don't know.
No, yes, you did, man. No, you went
Okay.
really in depth. Okay, so there's two parts of this I want to talk about. You talked about like SEO, how it's changed a lot in the past couple of years, and also how Google's constantly changing, especially with like the Reddit threads and the community. So I want to talk about that, but maybe we should talk about first like what you just talked about, which is, and this is like crucial. I've worked with a lot of like content people, content strategy people. Even when I was just working full time, I've worked with these people, and I don't think anyone I've worked with has done what you just said, which is going to the experts that are in the company that are especially client facing, right? They're talking to like the people that they are providing the service to. And they have a unique perspective on like what works best, what doesn't, what clients want to hear and what clients don't want to hear. Because at the end of the day, right, like the content that's being made is supposed to answer questions that your prospects will have before they ask them. So that way your salespeople have less work to do, and your prospects feel like they're understood, so they want to work with you because they're like, hey, like this guy's answering my questions before I even have them. This is great. I think that's so cool, and then especially because you said you're marrying that to, you know, SEO, like basically optimizing the article or the blog that you're writing so that it has the keywords that are semantically related so that it does show up in Google. And so you're basically pairing best of both worlds, because there are some people that just do the interviews and don't optimize it. And then there are people that write optimized content, but it's like really boring and generic. So when you do both at the same time with your content, sure, it takes a little bit longer, but like it's actually a good piece of content. So I think that is so cool.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to do it. And there are ways to streamline it. I think it's a lot of effort up front, setting time for the interviews, asking the right questions. You're basically kind of having to onboard yourself and learn about their product and their industry. Um, but if I get in front of, say, a customer success manager and I say, what's helping y'all retain clients? What are people's pain points? They're going to have all the answers for you, because they're dealing with it every single day. You record that conversation, you have a transcript. all you have to do at this point, because people always like to talk about AI and content, is I just take that transcript, put it into Claude or GPT or whatever you're using, and just say, hey, pull out all the major insights from this. There's your content topics, and from there you can look at your keyword research, and then you can really identify where you need to put your focus. Because at this point, anyone can sign up for an Ahrefs account. Anyone can sign up for ClearScope or Surf for SEO, or any of the tools that are online, as long as you have the money for it, and start pumping out content. But unless you have real insights, you're not going to get the results you want to see, and they're not going to be as relevant. So yeah, that's my tactical takeaway for this podcast.
That is incredible, man. No,
Yeah.
seriously, like you could sell that advice, and that's why it's good. Like you could get on a call with someone that like is paying you
Say,
for that.
do this.
So exactly. No, but that's such a cool strategy. And then okay, so let's get into the SEO, like what you were talking about with SEO and how it's been changing. I want to talk about the Reddit communities real quick because I have definitely noticed that, and I don't really know why. I think I honestly I don't know if you have like a hypothesis as to why that's been happening, but to add on to SEO being super weird right now, the AI functionality too. Like whenever you ask a question, because a lot of people don't use Google the same way they did 10 years ago, where they do like the modifiers and the ands and stuff, which was basically like Boolean logic, which I never did that, by the way, but like my partner like used to do that all the time. And she would always be like, bro, why are you typing in a question? Just do this, this, and this. And I was like, no, like this is how SEO works.
Trust me, this is it.
But yeah, but I'll say this is like, man, that the AI takes up so much space, especially on the phone, man. Like,
Yeah.
so how, like, especially for you, like someone who is, focused on SEO and on content too, like, how are you dealing with that? Like, how do you deal with the AI that's coming into play too? Which I'm throwing a curveball because I know I didn't ask you this question
That's
before.
that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, the question is, how am I dealing with AI articles, kind of polluting search results?
Yes, that's the question. Yep.
I think what I think every marketing channel has its pros and cons, and one of those cons with SEO is that there is going to be a lot that's out of your control, and that it is constantly changing. Um, and I think as an SEO, you kind of have to get into this mindset of you're playing the long game, and that Google will eventually crack down on a lot of the AI articles that are ranking. Of course, there's ways to get around it. Like there are AI detector tools where you can go in and rewrite your article, until it passes. But I think at the end of the day, what you're dealing with is user intent. And then ultimately, it's the searcher who's going to click on those articles and decide, is this quality or is it not? And also, I think SEO needs to be supported by other channels. Like, yes, you are writing with search in mind, but if you have access, to a team that's in house, say, hey, we're writing this content. Make sure you get it in your newsletter, on your client-facing emails within your communities, and people are going to discover anyway. The higher the quality is, you're also going to earn backlinks. We can talk about some backlinking strategies that don't necessarily just involve purchasing backlinks. But I mean, if you're doing all those activities, eventually Google is going to correct itself again, and it won't be an issue. I just think right now we're in the thick of it. We're all dealing with it, and everyone's frustrated. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. That's such a cool answer, man. I think it's just a long-term thing, like you said. I think as long as you're focusing on quality content that can be used as sales enablement tools as well, then like you're
Yeah.
kind of getting the best of both worlds. So that's awesome, man. Cool. Let's get into the next question here. So, as this is maybe more geared towards like our agency owners, but like how is lead gen going for you as an entrepreneur, someone who's been doing this for several months, almost a year now, right? Like it's close to it, right?
Yeah, I'm getting close to the year mark. It feels like it's weird. At the same time, I feel like it's been so much longer, but also it's like I started yesterday. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but yeah, I'm
It
almost a year in
does.
at this point.
It does make sense, bro. I feel like the days go by fast and they stack fast, but at the same time, like every day you go into it and you're like kind of excited about it. So
Mhm.
it feels like you just started. So like I love that, man.
Yes. Yeah, and in terms of lead gen, Man, I'd say at the first 2, 3 months, I'll be honest, I was like kind of in panic mode. I left my full-time job and I checked all my boxes, right? I'm like, okay, I have 6 months cash runway. I have this service in mind. I have people interested. I've done everything I need to do. But as I'm sure like you've realized too, like once you're actually in the weeds and you're doing it, everything changes. For that was at least my experience. And so I got 2, 3 months in, and one, I realized I didn't like the services I was providing. I mean, I was doing everything content. I was like, I'll do your newsletter. I'm doing webinar campaigns with email, and I was doing everything. And it made my messaging and positioning really, really cloudy. I didn't know how to pitch myself to people. I didn't know what I was trying to pitch. I didn't know what clients I was trying to target. And so eventually, after those 2, 3 months, that's when I really laser focused and said, I'm just doing SEO and content. The best service I deliver. I'm really interested in the fintech space, and that's the bulk of my in-house experience because I understand those buyers and what they need, and I really like earlier stage companies. So I'm like, let me just take all that and get laser focused.
Yeah.
And from there, um, a lot of it has been referral based. I know when you sent me over some of these questions, I'm really active in a couple different Slack communities. And also, this is a quick sidebar. This is a cool story. When I first
Yeah, I want to hear
left,
it.
I was really fortunate that I ended up reconnecting with an old, I guess you'd call a mentor. He is a mentor to me. He's an agency owner based in the Atlanta metropolitan area. They're an agency called Five Tool. They also do SEO. And I met him at my first in-house role. Um, and he was the SEO agency we hired. And once I started working with him, I was like, that's what I want to do. This guy's awesome. And they're a great agency. They do quality work. When I left my full-time position to start StoryWon, he said, hey, sorry you're leaving. Why don't you come work out of my office? He's got like an industrious office. He's like, come work out of my office. Come in whenever you want. I don't care. He's like, do your own thing, but just come shadow me. And I did. And I white labeled for them. I did contractor work from them. And every once in a while, they'd say, hey, this client that we have, they're not a good fit for us because they've way scaled at this point. They're like, why
Yeah.
don't you take them on? Because otherwise we're just going to send them to someone else. And I said yes, which I mean I could talk about the story for another 20 minutes, but I think like the lesson from that for me, and I think what's huge for anyone who's a freelancer and agency owner, is this idea of partner led growth is huge. Like if I come across someone who's into paid advertising or has a need for PPC, I'm not going to spread myself thin and try to figure that out. I'm going to say, oh, I know this guy, Ian. Let me, let me send you his contact information. And so I'd say building those relationships and being active in those communities and just kind of spreading knowledge has been a really good source of inbound leads. And I'd say also because I'm operating, at the scale of a consultant, I do have, a limited capacity. So I'm not as worried about lead gen at scale. But it has worked for me so far. I haven't had a ton of churn, and it keeps me it keeps me very busy. So like it's going well.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I think like one, like your story is so cool. I think that's just like that's just like a lucky instance. I believe a lot in luck, and like I truly think that to be successful nowadays, like it does require luck. Like you can do everything right and still be unlucky, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But dude, I think what's really cool about your situation, really, and it resonates with me is because whenever I started out, the first 2 or 3 months, like I'm only on month 4 now, probably. I don't even remember. It's like 4, I think. And yeah, those first 2 or 3 months are stressful because you don't know you have like this skill set that you are offering for your full-time role, and it's very far reaching. You can do a lot of different things, right? And you go on a call and you're like, I do this, I do this and this, and then like your client's confused, and then you're confused, and you're like, dude, like I don't even know what I'm
You're like, what am I
selling at
doing?
this point.
Why? Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. And it's not to mention it's very anxiety inducing. Like as the person trying to sell, like I'm sure for you is probably a learning experience to get a little bit better at sales as well, because you're no longer the person that someone's trying to get a meeting with. you're the person that you're trying to get a meeting with this other person. So you have to control the meeting flow. You have to learn all these other skills. So I love that you just kind of alluded to the fact that like, starting out, like, it is probably the hardest part because you don't know what you want to do.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
starting out is really hard. And I have become really interested in sales over the past couple of months, which is interesting because I've never been in a sales role. I was never an SDR or an account exec or anything. But I think the key for, any early stage agency person, freelancer, whatever, is when you're on a sales call, you're not a sales rep. You are a consultant and you're there to solve a
Yeah.
problem and, give as much value up front as you can, enough to where you basically say to the client, hey, I've laid out for you everything that you need to do. Now you just have to execute. But, 9 times out of 10, they don't have the skill to execute, or even if they could potentially learn or have the skills, they don't have the time, and you're the obvious solution at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I could even get into like how I've set up my discovery process, my sales process, and kind of how that translates into, the service delivery. But really, getting laser focused and like having, sorry, when I talked about developing an SOP, I mean, I have
Yeah.
set steps for every discovery call, for every sales call, and it's made a huge difference. And you're developing goodwill up front. That's been huge as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. We can definitely save some of those for like the community. We have
Yeah.
like this like Slack community, and yeah, basically if you're an agency owner listening, reach out to me and I can get you in there. But basically that's just where we share some insights every single week and some cool stuff that, we're doing that kind of stimulates deal flow, and then we just kind of do white label services with each other. So quick plug of that. But but yeah. Cool. So I'm trying to keep this around 30 minutes long. We've been recording for about 26 minutes now. So I want to rapid fire a couple questions off you, Alec.
You got it.
And the first one, is coming is, what do you think the most overrated marketing strategy or tactic is right now?
You sent this to me, and I struggled, and I was itching my head. I was like, "What is overrated?" Because I think what's tough for me is I feel like any marketing channel or tactic can be effective, in the right context. It depends on, again, what's your go-to-market motion, what industry are you in, where are your buyers, where are they looking. I'd say my biggest frustration, having worked in house, is this idea of what I call checklist marketing, which you're just checking a box on every tactic. You don't always need ABM. You don't need a chatbot. You don't need to be active in every single space. If you can find the 2, 3 channels, that work for you, if you're getting results, just double down. You don't need to spread yourself thin. And I think part of that is just a lot of downward pressure on marketing executives to be constantly. And I think as marketers, we face pressure to constantly be doing things, constantly be innovating and looking for new sources of leads, that we fall into this trap. But I guess my answer to the question is the most overrated tactic is just doing too much. You don't need to do too much. Figure out what works, get really good at it, and focus on it. And you can try other channels and experiment later. But
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
That's really cool, man. I think that's most evident in the social media game, where someone is posting, maybe they get good traction on LinkedIn, or maybe they don't even have traction yet, but then they're like, hey, we have to post the same stuff to Instagram, into Facebook, into YouTube, into Spotify. And I'm just going to be real with you, that is really time consuming and really hard
Yes.
to do. And if you don't even have traction on one of those platforms yet, why are you scaling this stuff out to other platforms that are fundamentally different and have to have different language, different presentation of the media and the communication? It's just like not a smart idea. So I think that's really true, dude. I think there's so many people out there that are like, we have to do everything. And I'm like, no, you don't.
But you
Like,
don't. But
focus on
you
one.
really don't, and you shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. All right, so now let's get into the underrated, man. Like, what is most underrated thing that you would say people are just like not focusing enough on today?
Again, I feel like this is super contextual. Maybe this is just underrated to me because I wish I saw more of it. But I'm really bullish on the idea of newsletters and communities. Again, I think it really depends. There's always a what if when you're talking about marketers, and just marketing. But if you're a product led company, or you want to have like a one-on-one connection with your potential buyers, I think newsletters and communities are great because it's an owned channel. I think a lot of people talk about with things like writing blog content or posting on LinkedIn is, it's out of your control. But when you have a newsletter community, you get to talk to your prospects one to one. And, again, you get instant feedback loop. If you have a personal, newsletter, you can easily test it, segment it, see what works, see what doesn't work. And it gives you that one-to-one, connection, with your audience. Because I'd say for me, in my previous role when we were doing content, the newsletter was just a repurposing channel. It's like, okay, we wrote this content. Let's just put for this webinar and like these 4 articles we did, let's bundle up in the newsletter and we'll send it out. And of course the engagement's really low. And they're like, man, I guess newsletters don't work. I'm like, no, they work. You just have to be really intentional about it. I'm bullish on newsletters and community. Again, it's contextual, but that's something I wish I saw more of done well.
Yeah. I think I love that you mentioned so newsletters. I 100% agree on. Like, I'm not going to get into it because you just basically explained it really well. I spend like an hour every week on my one newsletter that I send a week.
Nice.
So like you have to spend time on it. But what I was going to say on the community piece, which I think is really cool, is like the idea of growing the community of like-minded people and getting them all in the same group. Alex Hermosi has like the investment in the school. That's essentially just like a community platform. And that thing has been really growing fast too, which is really interesting. I was like messing around with it the other day and I was like, what does this look like? So I like created my own community on like the free trial and everything, which I actually, by the way, need to cancel because I forgot I'm going to be charged for that. But yeah, I mean, like it is definitely, you could make a business out of it for sure. And I think that, it also could be leveraged. I think it makes sense for some companies that are bigger to maybe even have a full-time, community engagement person on staff to like handle the communities that they have. Cause that could be a huge, I mean, it's an owned resource, like you said, an owned platform of media. So yeah, I think that's so cool. And I really like that you brought that up.
Definitely.
All right. So last question. Obviously you kind of alluded to it early on about like stress and stuff, but like how do you cope with stress on a daily basis as an entrepreneur?
There's always stress. I think if you decide to go on this path, you should do it with the knowledge that there is going to be stress. But I think for me, it's just, I mean, there's stress, in a full-time position. It's just different kinds of stress. So I think for me, I really needed to get my priorities straight. And the first thing was just getting rid of all the external stressors in my life. Like don't be worried about what other people are thinking. Don't set unrealistic goals for yourself, because you're just putting unnecessary pressure on yourself day to day, and it's going to make you unfocused. And you're worrying about the wrong kinds of things, and it's just mental energy that you're wasting. I mean, this is just generic advice, but I stand by it. I'm really not into super hustler culture, grinding all the time. When I first started out in those first 2-3 months and I was panicking, I was all in all the time, every day, on weekends and evenings. And I was really just spinning my wheels, and I was really busy, and I was like, I'm productive, I'm getting stuff done, but I was unhappy, I was unfulfilled, I wasn't getting the results I wanted. And I think just taking a step back and getting your 8 hours of sleep or however much you need, eating well, exercising, whether it's like you walk, run, go to a dance class, do boxing, whatever that is, and just carving out time to have like a more balanced life. For me, that's been a game changer, because now when I do sit down to work, I'm fully locked in. I'm not, worried about all these other things. I feel like it's generic advice, but it's generic advice for a reason, because it works.
Yeah.
And it's been huge for me.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think the hustle culture is over dramatized, which like I'm a victim of it. I'm not gonna lie. I work long days and I work on the weekends, but like truthfully, it's because I want to. And it's not because I feel like I have to. So that's a very key distinction in like the hustle culture versus I just want to do it because like that's what I'm doing with my life right now, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's a cool way of just handling the stress. And I like that you just mentioned too, like it's not just agency owners and entrepreneurs. I mean, like full-time jobs have stress too. And at the end of the day, it's just like what you want to do with your time. So like if you are thinking about doing an agency, or if you are thinking about doing your own sort of software company, like yeah, it's gonna be stressful, but like you're gonna be stressed in other things if you don't do it anyway. So might as well give it a try.
Might as well give it a try. And I think to your point, if you want to work a 10 to 12 hour day, you know, 1 week, like you get to dictate that. You get to dictate your schedule, as opposed to when you're working in house and someone says, okay, we have this feature release coming up, you know, we need everyone to kind of get on board and just, you know, nose to the grindstone. I mean, it can take over your life. But if you want to choose to work a 5 hour day, work 4 days a week, or you want to, you know, pull all nighter and work on the weekends, you know, you can allow yourself to do that. But it's just balance, you know. I
Yeah,
think, you know, it all comes in waves and stuff, but just having that freedom of choice has helped me take that pressure off myself. And it's just made me feel more fulfilled in my day to day, and I do better work because of it.
I love that, man. I love that. All right, well, we're gonna wrap up here, Alec. How can people reach out to you if they wanted to work with you or just talk to you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Send me an email. It's alec@storywon.com, or you can DM me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty, you know, I feel like, you know, most of us, I'm on it, you know, probably
Yeah.
more than the average person. Yeah, send me a DM, shoot me an email. And yeah, I'm always open to chat. I usually get back to people pretty quick.
Awesome. All right, Alec. Well, it was so awesome having you on the podcast today. For our listeners, hopefully you found this really insightful. I know I actually learned a lot of stuff on this call. Like, I'm not deep in the SEO space, but I'm sure that if you're listening to this on your commute to work or literally working out or walking, and you heard what Alex said about talking to the experts and getting their insight, pairing that with keyword strategy, if you found that useful, be sure to give this podcast a rating of 5 stars. It takes literally 2 seconds, but it really helps a lot. And we're really brand new. So any help that you could provide us, that would be the best way you could. So with that being said, really appreciate you listening today. And I will see you in the next podcast.